Under the morning sunlight shining over Serenity Lake, Henry Dawson began his day with a routine that had been ingrained in him for decades. After the flag-raising ceremony, he walked out to his beloved garden, where vibrant roses swayed gently in the breeze. Henry bent down, his skilled hands carefully lifting each stem to inspect whether it needed pruning. Though his body had grown frailer with age, he poured his heart and soul into caring for each rosebush, just as he had done when Margaret was alive. To Henry, the garden was a sanctuary of sweet memories. He recalled the afternoons when Margaret would sit on the porch, smiling as he recounted stories from his days in the military. Now, every rose bush carried a unique story. The red roses by the fence were Margaret's favorites. The white roses lining the walkway had been planted to celebrate their 40th wedding anniversary. For Henry, watering the plants, or removing a wilted leaf, was a way to hold on to those precious memories. Anna Dawson, his only daughter, often visited him on weekends. At 40 years old, she still cherished every corner of the garden, where her childhood laughter and her mother's tales lingered among the roses. To Anna, the garden wasn't just a repository of memories, but also a bridge connecting her to her steadfast father, who had always taught her to love and protect the things that mattered most. That morning, Anna's laughter rang out from the front gate. She arrived carrying a small basket filled with new flower seeds. "Dad, I brought some new varieties from last weekend's flower fair," she said, her voice brimming with excitement. Anna always sought ways to make her father's garden even more vibrant. The two sat together under the shade of an old tree, planting each seed with care. In that serene moment, time seemed to stand still. However, their lives weren't as peaceful as Serenity Lake's idyllic exterior suggested. The distant roar of engines disrupted the tranquility, drawing Henry's attention toward the sound. His sharp eyes narrowed as he recognized the source, the Black Vultures. This biker gang had rolled into town a few weeks ago, claiming an abandoned warehouse near the lakeshore as their base. They hosted rowdy parties that lasted through the night and left behind a trail of destruction that had unsettled the entire community. Anna noticed the shift in her father's demeanor. "Have they been bothering you, Dad?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. Henry shook his head, unwilling to burden her, but the subtle tension in his features betrayed his worry. Having endured the trials of war, Henry knew all too well the potential danger posed by lawless individuals like these bikers. As the father and daughter continued their work in the garden, another noise pierced the calm. This time, it was closer. Laughter and the guttural rumble of motorcycle engines. A group of black vultures roared past their property, their taunts breaking the silence. "Hey, old man, nice garden. Looks like a cemetery, though," one of them shouted, eliciting laughter from the group. Anna's fists clenched at her sides, but she held her tongue. Henry remained silent, though his firm grip on the gardening shears revealed his inner resolve. One biker, clad in a leather jacket adorned with skull insignias, suddenly veered his motorcycle onto the property, skidding deliberately through the garden. The once beautiful rows of red roses, the ones Henry and Margaret had planted together during the early years of their marriage, were crushed under the bike's tires. Anna's anguished cry echoed as tears welled up in her eyes. Henry stood motionless, gripping his cane tightly as his knuckles turned white. He said nothing, but his gaze followed the gang as they rode off, their mocking laughter lingering in the air. That night, Henry sat quietly in his modest home, the deafening music from the warehouse reverberating through the walls and rattling the windows. From his chair, he could see the garden through the window. The roses, now reduced to broken stems, seemed like a reflection of his wounded pride and cherished memories. Margaret's words came back to him. "This garden is more than just flowers. It's a symbol of hope." Henry drew a deep breath, his eyes glinting with a newfound determination. He knew he couldn't let things continue this way. The next morning, Anna returned, her resolve mirroring her father's. She carried a bag of gardening tools and looked at him with determination. "We can't let them win, Dad. Let's fix the garden together," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. Henry nodded silently, and they set to work. They trimmed the broken stems, removed the damaged roots, and replanted where they could. Yet, as Anna sifted through the remnants of the devastation, she realized this wasn't just about restoring the garden. It was about reclaiming their peace and standing firm against those who sought to destroy it. As the sun set, the garden began to regain some of its former beauty. Those scars of the damage remained. Henry knew this temporary peace wouldn't last. Groups like the Black Vultures seldom retreated without a fight. Standing in the garden that evening, he resolved to defend what mattered most. Not just his roses, but the spirit of Serenity Lake. At 92 years old, Henry Dawson was still a soldier at heart, and he understood that sometimes, to protect peace, one must be prepared for battle. The next morning dawned with a fragile calm, the kind that often precedes a storm. Henry and Anna finished their work in the garden early, hoping to salvage what remained of their sanctuary. They exchanged few words, both aware of the tension that hung heavy in the air. The distant growl of motorcycle engines had become a familiar sound, one that set their nerves on edge. By mid-morning, as Henry inspected the freshly planted roses, the rumble grew louder. This time, it wasn't just passing noise. A group of Black Vultures roared up the road leading to the house, their engines revving aggressively. They pulled to a stop outside the property, their laughter echoing across the yard. Anna stood beside Henry, her heart pounding. She whispered, "Dad, let's go inside." Henry shook his head, standing his ground. "This is our home," he said firmly, his voice low but steady. The leader of the group, a tall man with a shaved head and a snake tattoo winding up his neck, sauntered forward. He leaned on the fence, smirking as his gang spread out behind him. "Well, look what we have here," he drawled. "The old man and his little garden." "Leave us alone," Anna snapped, stepping forward. Her voice wavered, but her anger was evident. The leader chuckled, shaking his head. "Feisty one, aren't ya?" He gestured to his gang, and one of them revved his engine, moving closer to the garden. Henry stepped forward, his weathered face calm but unyielding. "You've done enough damage," he said. "This is private property. Leave." The gang leader's smirk faded, replaced with a sneer. "You think a broken-down old man can tell us what to do?" One of the bikers, emboldened by his leader's words, gunned his motorcycle and swerved onto the property, tearing through the freshly restored garden. Dirt and petals flew into the air as the bike carved a path of destruction. Anna cried out in dismay, rushing toward the damage, but Henry held her back. "Stop it!" Hannah shouted, tears in her eyes. The gang erupted in laughter, their leader clapping sarcastically. "You should thank us, old man. We're giving this place some character." Henry's jaw tightened, his grip on his cane firm. He watched as the bikers lingered for a moment longer before riding off, their taunts echoing in their wake. When the dust settled, the garden was once again in ruins. Anna turned to Henry, her voice breaking. "Dad, we can't keep letting them do this. They'll destroy everything." Henry's gaze didn't waver from the road where the bikers had disappeared. "You're right," he said quietly. "We can't." That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Henry retrieved a small wooden box from a shelf in his study. Inside was a collection of keepsakes from his time in the military. Medals, letters, and a single, well-worn card. It bore the emblem of the Eagle Squadron Veterans Alliance, a group of his old comrades who had vowed to support each other in times of need. Henry sat at his desk, turning the card over in his hand. He hadn't spoken to them in years, but he knew this was a call he had to make. He picked up the phone and dialed the number etched into the card. After a few rings, a gruff voice answered. "Eagle Squadron. Who's calling?" "This is Henry Dawson," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "I need your help." There was a pause, followed by a sharp intake of breath. Henry Henry Dawson, from the Pacific Theater? Yes. The voice on the other end softened. Say no more, Henry. Where are you? Henry provided his address and the man replied, We'll be there. The call ended, leaving Henry with a sense of both relief and anticipation. He knew his friends wouldn't let him down. That night, he sat by the window, watching the stars as the distant sound of music from the Black Vulture's warehouse filled the air. For the first time in weeks, he felt a flicker of hope. The next morning, Serenity Lake was greeted by an unfamiliar sound. The deep, synchronized rumble of motorcycle engines echoed down the main road. But these weren't the chaotic, threatening noises of the Black Vultures. These were deliberate, purposeful. Henry stepped onto his porch, just as a convoy of motorcycles appeared on the horizon. They were adorned with American flags and military insignias, their riders clad in leather vests bearing the emblem of the Eagle Squadron Veterans Alliance. Anna stood beside her father, her eyes wide. Who are they? She asked. Henry's lips curved into a small smile. They're friends. The bikers parked their motorcycles in a neat line along the street, dismounting with practiced ease. The leader of the group, a burly man with silver hair and a scar running across his cheek, approached Henry with an outstretched hand. Henry, he said warmly, it's been a long time. Henry clasped his hand firmly. Good to see you, Frank. Frank turned to the other veterans, his voice booming. All right, boys and girls, let's show these Black Vultures what real discipline looks like. The veterans wasted no time organizing themselves. Some began setting up surveillance equipment around the neighborhood, while others patrolled the area on their motorcycles. Their presence was a stark contrast to the chaos the Black Vultures had brought. By noon, word of the Eagle Squadron's arrival had spread through the town. Residents emerged from their homes, cautiously observing the new arrivals. It didn't take long for curiosity to turn into gratitude as the veterans introduced themselves, offering words of reassurance and promises of protection. That afternoon, as the Black Vultures prepared for another night of revelry, they were met with an unexpected sight. The Eagle Squadron had set up camp just outside the warehouse, their motorcycles forming a line of defense. Frank stood at the forefront, arms crossed, as the gang approached. What the hell is this? The Black Vulture's leader demanded. Frank didn't flinch. This is us telling you that your free reign is over. You're not welcome here anymore. The gang leader sneered. You think a bunch of old-timers can stop us? Frank stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. We've faced worse than you. Now, you can leave peacefully or we can involve the law. Your choice. The tension hung heavy in the air as the two groups faced off. Henry stood with the veterans, his presence a silent testament to their resolve. The Black Vultures exchanged uneasy glances, realizing they were no longer the dominant force in Serenity Lake. Finally, the gang leader threw up his hands in mock surrender. Fine, but this isn't over. As the Black Vultures retreated, the residents of Serenity Lake emerged from their homes, cheering and applauding the Eagle Squadron. Henry looked around, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. For the first time in weeks, the town felt like home again. But Henry knew this was only the beginning. The battle for Serenity Lake wasn't over, but with the Eagle Squadron by his side, he was ready for whatever came next. In the following days, the transformation of Serenity Lake began in earnest. The Eagle Squadron didn't just drive out the Black Vultures. They inspired the entire community to take back their town. Henry and Frank worked together to organize neighborhood meetings. At these gatherings, the Eagle Squadron shared strategies for maintaining safety and security while encouraging the residents to stand united. A community is only as strong as its people, Frank would often say, his deep voice resonating with conviction. Iron Lady, a fiercely determined veteran who had served in Iraq, spearheaded the effort to rebuild the damage left by the Black Vultures. Under her leadership, the residents and veterans worked side by side, restoring broken fences, repainting walls, and replanting gardens that had been destroyed. Anna became her father's right hand in this effort, her passion for protecting their home ignited by the courage she saw in him. One morning, as Henry and Anna worked in their garden, Frank approached with a thoughtful expression. "Henry," he began, "we've gathered enough evidence against the Black Vultures to take to the authorities. With the recordings from our surveillance and the testimonies of the townspeople, they won't have a leg to stand on." Henry nodded, his hands resting on his cane. "Good. But we need to think beyond just getting them arrested. We have to ensure Serenity Lake stays safe for the long haul." Frank smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." Together, they began drafting plans for a neighborhood watch program. The initiative would involve regular patrols by volunteers, with guidance and training provided by the Eagle Squadron. Residents eagerly signed up, buoyed by the success they had already achieved with the veterans' support. Meanwhile, the authorities began cracking down on the Black Vultures. Armed with irrefutable evidence, the local police raided their warehouse, uncovering stolen goods, illegal weapons, and evidence of other criminal activities. Several gang members were arrested, including their leader, who could no longer hide behind his bravado. As news of the arrest spread, Serenity Lake let out a collective sigh of relief, but Henry and the Eagle Squadron knew better than to let their guard down. One afternoon, as Henry sat on his porch, watching the townspeople pass by with newfound confidence, Anna joined him with 2 cups of tea. She handed him a mug and sat down beside him, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Dad," she began, "I've been thinking, what if we turned the warehouse into something positive for the community?" Henry raised an eyebrow. "Go on." Hannah's eyes lit up as she explained. "It could be a place for everyone to come together, a community center where people can learn new skills, hold events, or just have a safe space to gather. And it could honor the veterans who've done so much for this town." Henry smiled, pride swelling in his chest. "I think that's a wonderful idea. Let's make it happen." With the support of the Eagle Squadron and the townspeople, the transformation of the old warehouse began. Volunteers poured in, bringing tools, supplies, and boundless energy. The building was cleaned, repaired, and painted a fresh, vibrant color. A plaque was placed by the entrance, dedicating the center to the veterans who had defended Serenity Lake. The grand opening of the Serenity Lake Community Center was a day of celebration. Flags were raised, speeches were given, and the townspeople gathered to honor the resilience and unity that had saved their town. Henry stood at the center of it all, his weathered face glowing with quiet pride. As the ceremony concluded, Iron Lady approached Henry with a grin. "Looks like we've turned this place around, old man," Henry chuckled. "It's not just me. It's all of us." The days that followed were filled with laughter and hope. Children played freely in the streets again, and neighbors who had once kept their heads down now greeted each other with warmth. The community center became a hub of activity, hosting everything from cooking classes to self-defense workshops. Henry's garden, once a symbol of loss, now stood as a testament to resilience. The roses bloomed brighter than ever, their colors vibrant under the sun. Every morning, as he raised the flag in his yard, he was joined by neighbors who had come to see him as more than just a war hero. They saw him as a beacon of hope. But Henry knew the work was never truly done. He remained vigilant, ready to guide and protect his community for as long as he was able. One evening, as he sat by the lake with Anna, watching the sunset cast its golden glow over the water, she turned to him with a smile. "Dad, do you ever think about how much this place has changed?" Henry nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "It's changed because we decided to fight for it. And as long as we keep fighting, Serenity Lake will always be home." Anna leaned her head on his shoulder, her heart full of gratitude for the father who had taught her the true meaning of courage and love. And as the stars began to fill the sky, Henry Dawson, gardener and guardian of Serenity Lake, felt a deep peace settle over him, knowing that his fight had been worth every moment. The transformation of Serenity Lake wasn't just a victory for its residents. It became a beacon of hope for surrounding communities. Word spread about how the town had stood against the Black Vultures, with veterans and civilians uniting to reclaim their homes. Journalists arrived to document the story, and Henry Dawson quickly became a symbol of resilience and leadership. Despite the newfound peace, Henry remained cautious. Thoughtlessly, Henry remained cautious. Thoughtlessly, Henry remained cautious. Evil doesn't simply disappear, he often reminded his neighbors. We've shown them what we're made of, but we must stay vigilant. The Serenity Lake Community Center flourished. Children who had once been confined to their homes due to fear now found refuge in its halls. They learned everything from art to mechanics, taught by the Eagle Squadron veterans and other community volunteers. Anna took the lead in organizing events, ensuring the center became a space where every resident felt welcome. One morning, as Henry prepared to raise the flag in his garden, he noticed a letter wedged under his front door. It was unmarked, with no return address. He opened it cautiously, his experienced eyes scanning the typed words. "We haven't forgotten. Serenity Lake will fall." Henry's jaw tightened. He showed Iron Lady and Frank the note during their morning meeting at the community center. Frank's brows furrowed. "It's a warning," he said. "They're regrouping." Iron Lady placed the note on the table with deliberate care. "We need to strengthen our defenses. If they come back, we'll be ready." The group decided to further fortify the town's preparations. Cameras were upgraded to cover blind spots, patrol schedules were revised to include nighttime rotations, and new residents were educated on the importance of community vigilance. Henry, meanwhile, spent more time with Anna, teaching her the lessons he had learned from years of service. "Courage," he told her one evening as they walked through the garden, "isn't just about standing tall in battle. It's about knowing what you're protecting and why it matters." The community remained on high alert, but weeks passed without incident. Then, on a stormy night, the tranquility of Serenity Lake was shattered. The roar of motorcycle engines echoed through the streets, accompanied by the unmistakable symbol of the Shadow Serpents, an even more dangerous gang than the Black Vultures. Their leader, Fang, was notorious for his ruthless tactics. His arrival in Serenity Lake signaled that this was no idle threat. The Shadow Serpents positioned themselves outside the community center, their intimidating presence meant to sow fear among the residents. But Henry and the Eagle Squadron were prepared. They had devised a plan to outsmart their new adversaries, combining their military precision with the strength of a united community. While Fang and his gang tried to intimidate with numbers, the veterans worked behind the scenes to document their every move. Hidden cameras captured their actions, and the local authorities were kept informed in real time. Iron Lady led a team to confront the Shadow Serpents directly. As she stepped forward, flanked by Frank and several other veterans, her voice rang out with unwavering resolve. "You think you can scare us? We've faced worse, and we've come out stronger every time. Leave now, or face the consequences." Fang sneered, but hesitated. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by civilians. "You don't know who you're messing with, lady," he spat. Iron Lady didn't flinch. "We know exactly who you are, and we know how to handle bullies like you." As the confrontation unfolded, Henry remained at the community center, coordinating efforts with Anna. They ensured the residents were safe and accounted for, while keeping the police updated on the situation. When the police arrived, they found themselves bolstered by the presence of the veterans, who had already cornered the Shadow Serpents with tactical precision. The gang was caught off guard, their bravado crumbling under the weight of a well-organized resistance. As the police began making arrests, Fang's fury turned to desperation. He lunged toward Iron Lady, but before he could reach her, Henry appeared, stepping forward with his cane in hand. "You've caused enough trouble here," Henry said, his voice steady and commanding. "It's time to answer for what you've done." He said. Fang glared at Henry, but something in the old man's unwavering gaze made him stop. The gang leader lowered his hands as the police placed him in handcuffs. When the last of the Shadow Serpents was escorted away, the residents of Serenity Lake gathered outside the community center. Cheers erupted as Iron Lady and the Eagle Squadron returned, their victory securing the town's safety once again. Anna hugged her father tightly, tears streaming down her face. "You did it, Dad. We did it." Henry smiled, his heart full as he looked out over the crowd. "This isn't just my victory. It's ours. Serenity Lake stands because we stood together." In the days that followed, the story of Serenity Lake reached far and wide. Communities across the country drew inspiration from their courage, and donations poured in to support the community center. Henry's garden became a symbol of hope, with visitors coming from miles away to see the place where the town's resistance began. And though Henry knew his years were numbered, he felt content knowing that his legacy would endure. Not just in the flowers he tended, but in the spirit of unity and resilience that Serenity Lake had come to embody. In the weeks following the Shadow Serpent's downfall, Serenity Lake blossomed into more than just a safe haven. It became a symbol of what a united community could achieve against overwhelming odds. The townspeople worked tirelessly to rebuild what had been damaged and fortify what remained. The garden Henry Dawson cherished became a centerpiece for their collective resilience, with new blooms symbolizing the rebirth of hope. Henry's mornings took on a new rhythm. As the sun rose, he would walk through the rows of roses, his steps steadier now, not from physical strength, but from the moral fortitude that radiated through the town. Each flower, vibrant and alive, felt like a tribute, not just to Margaret, but to the spirit of Serenity Lake. The community center thrived. It became more than a gathering place. It was a hub for education, support, and camaraderie. Children attended classes on everything from history to self-defense, while adults participated in workshops on emergency preparedness and community building. Veterans from neighboring towns visited to offer their expertise, turning Serenity Lake into a model for other small communities. Henry, though modest, found himself at the heart of this new chapter. People sought his advice, his wisdom, and his unwavering optimism. "You've become our anchor," Anna told him one evening as they worked side by side in the garden. "This town wouldn't be what it is without you." Henry chuckled, shaking his head. "It's not just me. It's all of us, working together. That's how we survived the war, and that's how we'll keep this place safe." But even as peace settled over Serenity Lake, Henry knew vigilance was key. He often met with Iron Lady and Frank to discuss ongoing security measures. Patrols continued, and the upgraded surveillance systems ensured that any unusual activity would be spotted immediately. One sunny afternoon, as the town prepared for its first annual Serenity Festival, a stranger arrived. He was a middle-aged man, dressed neatly but with an air of weariness about him. He introduced himself as Ethan, a former member of the Black Vultures who had left the gang years ago. "I heard what you did here," Ethan said, his voice tinged with regret. "I just wanted to see it for myself." Henry studied Ethan carefully, sensing sincerity in his tone. "What brought you here?" Henry asked. Ethan looked around, his eyes lingering on the blooming garden. "To see if it's possible to start over. To see if people can really change." Henry's gaze softened. "People can change," he said. "But it takes courage, commitment, and a willingness to face the truth." Ethan nodded, his expression resolute. Over the coming days, he became a quiet presence in the town, helping repair the damage left by the Shadow Serpents and contributing his insights on preventing further gang activity. The townspeople, though wary at first, began to accept him as he proved his intentions through actions rather than words. The festival arrived on a crisp autumn morning, drawing visitors from nearby towns. The streets were alive with music, laughter, and the aroma of food cooked by residents eager to share their gratitude and pride. Children played games, while veterans shared their stories with curious visitors. The community center was adorned with banners that read, "Strength and unity, and hope blossoms here." During the festival's main event, The town gathered at the garden for a special dedication ceremony. A polished stone monument was unveiled, engraved with the words, "In honor of resilience, unity, and love, Serenity Lake, reborn." Henry stood before the crowd, his voice steady but thick with emotion. This garden, this town, and this community are living proof that no matter how dark the days may seem, we can overcome anything when we stand together. Margaret used to say that every flower tells a story. This garden tells the story of all of you, and it's a story I'll cherish for the rest of my days. The applause that followed was thunderous, accompanied by cheers and heartfelt expressions of gratitude. Anna stood beside her father, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. "You've given them more than a story, Dad. You've given them a legacy." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the festival continued into the night. Lanterns illuminated the streets, and music echoed through the town. Henry watched from a bench near his garden, surrounded by the people who had become his extended family. He felt Margaret's presence in the cool evening breeze, a comforting reminder that love endures, even through the hardest trials. As the stars appeared in the clear night sky, Henry Dawson allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. Serenity Lake had faced its share of battles, but it had emerged stronger, more united, and filled with hope. And in the heart of it all was a garden that would continue to bloom, season after season, telling the story of a community that refused to give up. In the weeks following the festival, the newfound harmony in Serenity Lake deepened. The community flourished, not just in spirit but in tangible ways. New businesses opened along the main street, schools received much-needed upgrades, and the center Henry helped build became a beacon of hope and support. Henry, now a symbol of the town's resilience, continued to be an active presence. He led gardening workshops for children and adults alike, sharing not just techniques for cultivating flowers, but lessons on patience, care, and the importance of nurturing both plants and relationships. People came from nearby towns to learn from the Serenity Gardener, as he was affectionately called. Anna, inspired by her father's steadfastness, began organizing outreach programs for neighboring communities. She worked with Iron Lady and the other veterans to host events that educated people on how to build resilience against threats like the shadow serpents. The initiative quickly gained traction, and Serenity Lake became a model for small towns looking to reclaim their peace and identity. Ethan, the former Black Vulture, grew into an integral part of these efforts. His first-hand knowledge of gang dynamics proved invaluable in helping the town anticipate potential threats. More importantly, his journey from a life of destruction to one of rebuilding inspired many, including other young men and women seeking a second chance. One day, as Henry and Ethan worked together planting a new row of roses in the garden, Ethan paused, his hands coated in rich soil. "Henry," he said, his voice hesitant, "how do you forgive yourself for the things you've done?" Henry looked up, wiping his brow. "It's not about forgetting or pretending the past didn't happen," he said. "It's about what you do now. Every day, you make a choice to be better, to help others, to leave something good behind. That's how you forgive yourself, by making your life matter." Ethan nodded, the weight of Henry's words settling deeply. He looked out at the garden, blooming with vibrant colors, and felt a spark of hope take root. Dear friends, the story of Henry Dawson is a vivid symbol of courage, love, and the strength of community. He fought not just for himself, but for the higher values we cherish: freedom, solidarity, and perseverance in the face of adversity. Imagine yourself in Henry's position, a veteran who spent his life defending his country, now facing intruders in his very own home. He did not retreat, but stood tall to protect what was most precious, not only for himself, but for the entire Serenity Lake community. What can we do to support him? Let us listen to this story and share it, so that more people can be inspired by his unwavering resilience. If you feel touched by the story of Henry Dawson and Serenity Lake, don't hesitate to hit the subscribe button right now We don't just tell stories, we inspire courage, unity, and the determination to overcome challenges. Stories like Henry's are not just journeys, but lessons for all of us to learn from as we continue to build a better, stronger community.